2026 is the year discipline replaces motivation and changes everything. Let me start with a truth most people don't want to hear. Motivation is a liar. It shows up when it wants to and disappears when you need it most. But discipline is honest. Discipline clocks in whether it feels good or not. If 2025 broke you, embarrassed you, humbled you, or exposed you, good, because broken ground is fertile ground. 2026 is not about hype. It's not about vision boards, quotes, or waiting to feel ready. 2026 is about rebuilding yourself brick by brick with discipline. See, motivation is emotional. Discipline is structural. Motivation says, I'll do it when I feel like it. Discipline says, I do it because this is who I am. And here's the secret most people miss. Your life doesn't change when your feelings change. Your life changes when your habits change. The future you want is hiding inside the boring things you avoid today. The early mornings, the quiet rooms, the repeated reps, nobody applauds. You don't rebuild your life on stages, you rebuild it in silence. Let me tell you something powerful. Success doesn't come from intensity, it comes from consistency. Anyone can go hard for a week. Champions show up for years, and that's why identity matters more than goals. Stop saying, I'm trying. Start saying, this is who I am. I am disciplined. I keep promises to myself. I finish what I start. Because when your identity changes, your behavior follows automatically. Now, understand this. Rebuilding yourself is painful, but you're going to feel pain anyway. You'll either feel the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. One builds muscles, the other builds excuses. Discipline hurts once, regret hurts forever. And here's how disciplined people win. They remove negotiation from their lives. When you have standards, you don't debate with yourself. You don't ask, should I show up? You show up because that's the standard. You don't ask, should I quit? You don't quit because that's not an option. Standards create freedom because decisions are already made. And finally, understand this. You don't rebuild by adding first. You rebuild by subtracting. Cut the habits that drain you. Cut the conversations that keep you small. Cut the patterns that produce the old you. You cannot enter 2026 carrying the baggage of 2024. Let me leave you with this. You don't need more motivation. You need more structure. You don't need more hype. You need higher standards. And if you choose discipline today, 2026 won't just look different. Will be different. And when you change, everything around you has no choice but to follow. Motivation is emotional, and emotions are unstable. They rise and fall based on sleep, mood, results, praise, criticism, weather, and circumstances. If your progress depends on motivation, your life will move only when your feelings cooperate. And feelings are unreliable partners. One day you feel unstoppable. The next day you feel tired, distracted, uninspired, or overwhelmed. That's why so many people start strong and finish nowhere. Motivation gets you excited, but it doesn't get you consistent. It creates movement without direction and energy without endurance. Discipline, on the other hand, is structural. Structure doesn't ask how you feel. Structure doesn't negotiate. Structure doesn't disappear when things get uncomfortable. Structure creates order where chaos used to live. Discipline is a system you can stand on when motivation collapses. It's the bridge between intention and outcome. When motivation says later, discipline says now. When motivation says tomorrow, discipline says do it anyway. That's the difference between people who talk about change and people who experience it. Emotional people wait for the right mood. Disciplined people operate on standards. They don't need to feel ready because readiness is irrelevant. They understand that feelings follow action, not the other way around. You don't wake up motivated, then act. You act, and motivation shows up after progress begins. Discipline is what allows you to move even when you're tired, uncertain, scared, or bored. It creates consistency. And consistency creates results. Results then create confidence, and confidence fuels momentum. That entire chain collapses without discipline at the foundation. Structure turns chaos into clarity. When your day has structure, your excuses lose power. When your habits are structured, procrastination has nowhere to hide. When your goals are structured into daily actions, overwhelm disappears because you're no longer staring at the mountain. You're simply taking the next step. Discipline removes decision fatigue. You no longer ask yourself if you should work, train, learn, or improve. You already decided. The decision was made in advance, when you were calm and logical, not in the moment when emotions try to hijack you. That's why discipline is freedom, not restriction. It frees you from the tyranny of your feelings. It frees you from inconsistency. It frees you from starting over every Monday. Motivation makes promises. Discipline keeps them. Motivation, once quick, wins. Discipline is committed to long-term transformation. Motivation thrives on excitement. Discipline survives boredom. And boredom is where most people quit, not because they can't do the work, but because it stopped being entertaining. Discipline understands that the work doesn't have to be exciting to be effective. Growth is repetitive. Progress is quiet. Mastery is built in routines that look unimpressive from the outside. But those routines, executed daily, compound into outcomes that look miraculous to people who rely on motivation. When you choose discipline, you stop building your life on feelings and start building it on principles. And principles don't change with your mood. That's why discipline is structural. It holds your life together when motivation falls apart. Your future is not built in moments of excitement, applause, or dramatic breakthroughs. It is built in the quiet, repetitive, boring moments that most people overlook, avoid, or quit too early. Everyone wants transformation, but very few people are willing to commit to the monotony that creates it. The truth is, progress is rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel heroic. Most days it feels ordinary. It feels like doing the same thing again with no immediate reward. And that's exactly why it works. Boring moments are where separation happens. While others are waiting for inspiration, you're stacking small actions. While others are chasing motivation, you're executing a routine. While others are scrolling, you're showing up. Those small decisions feel insignificant in the moment, but they are shaping the direction of your life in real time. The future doesn't respond to intensity, it responds to consistency. One perfect day won't change your life, but 1,000 ordinary days executed with discipline will. The work that changes everything usually looks unimpressive from the outside. Waking up early when no one is watching, reading when no one is clapping, training when progress feels slow, practicing when improvement is barely noticeable. These moments don't feel special, but they are powerful because they compound. What you do repeatedly becomes who you are. Boring moments create identity. Every time you do the work without excitement, you reinforce the belief that you are the kind of person who follows through. That belief is more valuable than any burst of motivation. Most people quit not because the goal is too hard, but because the process is too quiet. They mistake boredom for lack of progress. They assume that if it doesn't feel exciting, it must not be working. But boredom is often a sign that the process is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Mastery is repetitive. Excellence is predictable. Success is the result of doing simple things longer than anyone else is willing to. The boring moments train your patience. They strengthen your discipline. They teach you how to show up even when there's no emotional reward. And that skill transfers into every area of life. When you can stay consistent without validation, you become dangerous. You no longer need external motivation because your momentum is internal. You stop looking for shortcuts because you trust the process. You stop chasing outcomes because you understand that outcomes are a byproduct of habits. Boring moments are also where character is formed. It's easy to be committed when things are exciting. It's easy to show up when results are visible. The real test is whether you can stay engaged when progress feels slow and the work feels repetitive. That's where most people fall off, and that's why most people stay average. But if you can learn to respect boring moments instead of resisting them, everything changes. You stop rushing the process. You stop comparing your timeline to others. You stop needing constant stimulation to stay engaged. You begin to find confidence in execution rather than excitement. Over time, those boring moments start producing visible results. And when they do, people will call it luck, talent, or overnight success. They won't see the hundreds of quiet days that built the foundation, but you'll know. Your future self will know. And it will be grateful that you didn't quit just because the process wasn't entertaining, because in the end, the future you want is built by the version of you who was willing to stay consistent when it was boring. Identity always comes before results, whether people realize it or not. You don't get results, RST, and then become a different person. You become a different person, and then your results have no choice but to change. Most people try to reverse this order. They chase outcomes hoping success will fix their habits, their confidence, their discipline, and their self-image. But outcomes don't create identity, they expose it. The reason results keep repeating is because identity hasn't changed. You can't outwork who you believe you are. Every action you take is a vote for the person you think you are, and every habit you keep is an expression of identity. If you see yourself as inconsistent, you'll find reasons to quit. If you see yourself as disciplined, you'll find a way to continue. Behavior follows belief. That's why temporary effort without identity change always collapses. You can push yourself for a short period through pressure, fear, or excitement, but eventually you return to your default identity. Sustainable transformation requires you to upgrade who you believe you are at the core. When identity shifts, behavior becomes automatic. You no longer rely on willpower because your actions align with your self-image. You don't ask whether you should do the work. You do it because it's what someone like you does. This is why disciplined people make progress even on bad days. They aren't motivated, they're aligned. They don't see discipline as something they force themselves to do. They see it as part of who they are. Identity creates standards. Standards create habits. Habits create results. If you skip the identity level and focus only on goals, you'll constantly feel like you're fighting yourself. Goals tell you what you want. Identity determines whether you follow through. The strongest commitments are not to outcomes, but to character. When you commit to being consistent, improvement becomes inevitable. When you commit to being reliable, trust follows. When you commit to being disciplined, results accumulate quietly. Identity also determines how you respond to failure. If you identify as someone who quits, setbacks become exits. If you identify as someone who adapts, setbacks become feedback. The same obstacle produces different outcomes depending on identity. That's why two people can face the same challenge and end up in completely different places. One sees it as confirmation of limitation. The other sees it as part of the process. Identity changes the meaning you assign to struggle, and meaning determines persistence. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your identity. That's why lasting change starts internally. Before you ask what you want to achieve, ask who you must become. Before you focus on results, focus on alignment. Decide the kind of person you are regardless of circumstances. Decide the standards you live by even when no one is watching. When identity is clear, results are inevitable. They may take time, but they will come because you are no longer trying to act differently. You are simply being who you decided to become. Pain is not a sign that something is wrong. It is often a sign that something is changing. Progress has always demanded a price, and that price is discomfort. There's no growth without resistance, no improvement without strain, and no meaningful transformation without some level of pain. The mistake most people make is assuming that pain means they should stop. In reality, pain is often confirmation that you are moving in the right direction. Muscles grow by tearing. Skills improve by failing. Confidence is built by facing fear, not avoiding it. Progress introduces friction because it forces you out of what is familiar. Comfort feels safe, but it keeps you static. Pain challenges you, stretches you, and demands adaptation. And adaptation is how progress happens. Everyone pays a price in life. The difference is not whether you will feel pain, but which kind you choose. There is the pain of discipline and the pain of regret. The pain of discipline is temporary and purposeful. It burns in the moment, but it builds strength, capability, and confidence over time. The pain of regret is slow and corrosive. It lingers, replaying missed chances and wasted potential. One pain moves you forward. The other keeps you stuck. Most people avoid short-term pain and end up living with long-term discomfort. They choose ease today and struggle tomorrow. Progress requires the opposite choice. It requires you to accept discomfort now so that life becomes easier. LA. Pain also acts as a filter. It separates those who want change from those who are committed to it. When things get uncomfortable, intentions are exposed. Anyone can start when it feels good. Very few continue when it hurts. That's why pain is such a powerful teacher. It reveals your priorities. It shows you how badly you want the outcome. It forces honesty. You can't fake discipline under pressure. Pain strips away excuses and exposes whether you are willing to do what is required, not just what is convenient. Pain also builds resilience. Each time you push through discomfort, you expand your tolerance for challenge. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What once scared you becomes familiar. This is how confidence is earned, not imagined. Confidence is not the absence of fear or pain. It is the knowledge that you can endure them. Progress doesn't eliminate pain. It changes your relationship with it. You stop seeing pain as an enemy and start seeing it as a signal that you are stretching beyond your current limits, a signal that growth is happening beneath the surface. Pain is temporary, but the capacity you build by enduring it is permanent. Avoiding pain keeps you the same. Embracing it reshapes you. Over time, you realize that the pain you feared was never the real threat. The real threat was staying comfortable long enough to never find out what you were capable of becoming. Standards eliminate negotiation because they remove uncertainty from your behavior. When standards are clear, decisions are already made. There is no debate, no internal argument, no emotional back and forth about what you should do. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they negotiate with themselves too often. Every negotiation creates an opportunity to quit, delay, or lower the bar. When you wake up and ask yourself, should I do the work today? You've already given yourself an exit. Standards remove that exit. They replace questions with commands. You don't ask if you show up. You show up because that's the standard. You don't ask if you finish. You finish because that's who you are. Negotiation is exhausting. It drains mental energy and creates decision fatigue. Every day becomes a battle between comfort and commitment. Standards end that battle. They simplify life. They reduce complexity. They turn discipline into routine rather than effort. When something is a standard, it no longer feels optional. It becomes normal. Just like brushing your teeth or locking the door, you don't debate it. You do it. That's the power of standards. They protect you from your emotions. Feelings change, moods fluctuate, motivation rises and falls, but standards remain fixed. On days you feel strong, standards keep you consistent. On days you feel weak, standards carry you forward. Without standards, emotions run your life. With standards, principles do. Standards also communicate self-respect. The standards you tolerate become the myths of your life. If your standards are low, your outcomes will match them. If your standards are high, your behavior must rise to meet them. You don't rise to goals, you fall to standards. Goals are aspirations. Standards are expectations. Goals inspire you. Standards govern you. That's why standards are more powerful than motivation. Motivation wants to feel good. Standards demand excellence. They don't care how tired you are, how busy you feel, or how inconvenient the work seems. They only care about alignment. Standards create identity. When you consistently act according to a standard, it reinforces who you believe you are. Over time, you stop seeing discipline as something you force and start seeing it as something you live. Negotiation disappears because acting any other way would feel out of character. Standards also create momentum. When there's no debate, action becomes faster. You move with clarity instead of hesitation. Progress accelerates because you're no longer stopping to ask permission from your feelings. You've already decided what kind of person you are and how you operate. That decision compounds over time. Most people don't need more information or more motivation. They need fewer negotiations. They need clear standards that remove choice from moments of weakness. Because when standards are set, excuses lose their power. And when excuses disappear, consistency becomes inevitable. Rebuilding requires subtraction first because you cannot create something new while clinging to what is destroying you. Most people think rebuilding is about adding more habits, more goals, more routines, more pressure. But real transformation starts by removing what no longer belongs. You don't build strength on a weak foundation, and you don't build a new life on old patterns. Subtraction creates space, and space is necessary for growth. If your life is full of distractions, excuses, toxic influences, and misaligned habits, there is no room for discipline, clarity, or progress to take root. Holding on to what's familiar feels safe even when it's harmful. That's why letting go is harder than starting. But rebuilding demands honesty. You have to confront what is costing you your future. Every habit you tolerate that doesn't serve your direction is a tax on your potential. Every relationship that drains your energy without adding value is a weight slowing you down. Every pattern that keeps you stuck is evidence that something must be removed before anything new can be sustained. Subtraction is uncomfortable because it feels like loss. You lose comfort, you lose familiarity, you lose versions of yourself that once made sense but no longer fit where you're going. But growth always requires sacrifice. You can't carry everything forward. Rebuilding forces you to choose between who you were and who you're trying to become. Most people fail here because they want change without loss. They want progress without discomfort. They want a new future without releasing the old one. That's not how transformation works. Subtraction sharpens focus. When you remove unnecessary noise, your priorities become clear. When you eliminate distractions, your discipline strengthens. When you cut out excuses, your standards rise. Subtraction also reveals commitment. It's easy to add new goals while keeping old habits. It's much harder to remove what feels good but holds you back. But that difficulty is the proof that subtraction matters. Rebuilding also requires emotional subtraction, letting go of limiting beliefs, letting go of past failures that define your self-image, letting go of the need for approval. You can't rebuild yourself while constantly trying to please people who benefit from the old version of you. Growth will make some people uncomfortable, and that discomfort is not your responsibility. Subtraction is not about becoming less, it's about becoming aligned. When you remove what doesn't serve you, what remains becomes stronger. Your time becomes more valuable. Your energy becomes more focused. Your effort becomes more effective. Over time, subtraction creates momentum. You move faster because you're no longer dragging unnecessary weight. Rebuilding doesn't start with doing more. It starts with letting go. And the courage to subtract is often the difference between people who change temporarily and people who rebuild permanently. Rebuilding yourself is not a moment. It's a decision you make and keep making when no one is watching. This isn't about hype, quick wins, or feeling inspired. It's about choosing discipline when motivation disappears. Showing up in boring moments, becoming the person who produces results before the results arrive. Paying the price of progress instead of the cost of regret, setting standards that remove excuses, and having the courage to subtract what no longer serves your future. 2026 doesn't need a new version of your intentions. It demands a new level of execution. If you commit to discipline over feelings, standards over negotiation, and consistency over comfort, your life will not stay the same. You won't just rebuild your circumstances, you'll rebuild your identity. And when that happens, success stops being something you chase and starts being something you attract. The question isn't whether 2026 will change. It will. The only question is whether you will be ready when it does.